Hello everyone, Ember Power here, and welcome back to a new video. In this one I'm going to be taking a look at the Raging Surf set that was fully revealed last night. Now, if you don't know already, this will not be all of the cards that are going to Paradox Rift. There will be two more mini sets, Ancient, Roar, and Future Flash, they're called. And they haven't been fully revealed. We have seen a lot of the cards from those sets, and a lot of cards from this set already. But it's just a case of seeing all the cards before we know what will be the full set basically for Paradox Rift. Just getting into the main translations here, we start off with Frostlass EX, which unfortunately is going to be a pretty underwhelming card. Only has 250 HP and it's also a grass type, so pretty underwhelming stats already. But it is a Terra type, so you're attacking for water energy, which is kind of interesting, I guess. Has the ability just out of reach that might shrink it down to a single prizer when it's knocked out, but it is on a coin flip, which makes it very flippant. Then the attack isn't really doing a whole lot, 140 damage. Pretty underwhelming, to be honest. You're still 2 echoing V-stars, but you're still pretty shy of getting the more tankier Pokemon in Standard. So I don't think this card is particularly strong. It does have a nice little snipe effect, but Manaphy is everywhere, so yeah. Unfortunately, I just don't think this card is particularly great. Which is a sad situation to be in because I do like Frostlass as a Pokemon, but yeah, but unfortunate. Then we have Lapras over here, which doesn't have much going on actually with this Lapras. I thought there was maybe something more interesting in the first attack, but I think I must have misread it. So only retrieving 3 basic energy cards from your discard pile is pretty bad. You're not even accelerating any energy. Yeah, nothing too great there. Maybe for GLC, I guess, if you really want to play a Lapras. Then we see an Octillery, which has the ability Suction Draw. Now, these abilities haven't really seen much play in the past. I know, I get a lot of flack when I say that because, people say, oh, just, try it out now. It could be very different. Yeah, I get that. But at the same time, the past cards exist for a reason. They never saw play, so I don't think they will see play now. These sorts of abilities, once you've evolved your Octillery, there's no way to move it outside of using a supporter, like Professor's Tour Scenario, for example, which will actually let you pick up Octillery, so you could reset it, but that's a supporter. This is just a draw 3 ability. Not the best, in all honesty. Maybe at some point if we get an item card again, like Scoop Up Net, but in all honesty, I don't think this card is super strong. Then we see the Snorunt to evolve from the Frostlass. Then we have a look at Garchomp EX here, which is honestly one of the best cards, if not the best card in the set. 320 HP water type, and it's a Terra type, so it will attack for fighting energy, although that's just its first attack, which is indeed Hydrolander. For a single fighting energy, does 160 damage, and then you can attach up to 3 fighting energy from your discard pile to your bench Pokemon in any way you like. Probably one of the most, if not the most efficient attack we've ever seen for a single energy. Just wildly efficient. It definitely means that if you run stuff like Cheryl, which, could be a fun option, if you play Cheryl, you can obviously just discard all the energy and then reset it by attaching 1 for turn. So I do think there is some sort of Cheryl Garchomp deck there. But aside from that, I think this card, what this card really needs is a good partner, because right now I can't think of really any Pokemon that you'd want to accelerate fighting energy to, aside from maybe Ting Lu. And Ting Lu, I think, doesn't need Garchomp necessarily. Maybe it does, and maybe I'm wrong about that. But in all honesty, I don't think Ting Lu needs Garchomp. And the fact that Ting Lu seems to be the best partner for Garchomp is a bit worrying. Now, you could try this out with stuff like the single prize Lucario, or maybe there's other single prize fighting type Pokemon, like stage 1s and such, that could work here. But in all honesty, you don't want to clunk up the deck, because this is, of course, a stage 2 anyway, so you want to make room for a draw engine and all that shabam. So it's going to be a little bit awkward to work out. There is the new Groudon, I think it's in this set, that we can have a look at later on, that's pretty good. But in all honesty, I don't think this card will be the best deck in Standard, not by a long shot. I think this will be a great card and maybe a great deck, but it definitely does need the right partner to take advantage of it, basically. It also has the attack Sonic Dive, though. It says discard 2 energy from his Pokemon and 120 Snipe, which is just really strong. It doesn't necessarily have to target the bench, which is also something worth mentioning, I guess. But still, why at that point wouldn't you just not use Hydrolander? But yeah, just something to bear in mind. So you can do the 120 snipe, maybe knock out a single prize Pokemon, maybe set up another Pokemon for a KO while accelerating energy after you use Hydro Land the following turn. So I definitely like this Pokemon. It's definitely a very strong card. Also has free retreat to boot, which is great. So you can just switch between Garchomps while spamming Cheryl. So I definitely like this card a lot, but it remains to be seen just how much of an impact this will have on Standard because we do need, of course, the right partners. The next up, though, is we have this Mantike, which is unfortunately the only baby Pokemon in the set, it seems. Like, a lot of people, including myself, thought with the release of Bonzi and Clefairy and Obsidian Flames, we would get, like, Magby back and stuff, and maybe even Smootrums and, like, all those weird baby Pokemon we haven't seen in ages, but unfortunately, it looks like we'll have to wait a bit longer to see any more. But Mantike, 30 HP, has the attack Fluffy Healing. Heal 120 damage from one of your bench Pokemon, and then just like Clefairy and Bonzi, it has free retreat. So it's an okay pivot. The healing 120 is pretty nice, but in all honesty, if you're having to give up a prize card just to like starve off like an attack or something, doesn't seem particularly great. Like maybe there is like a healing stall deck that could take advantage of this, but in all honesty, I don't think this card is super powerful, not in the long run at least. But then we do see a Palkia, which does seem to be a decent single prize option in Chen Pal decks, or maybe even Lost Zone, I guess. Price count does 80 damage, and if you have more prize cards remaining in your opponent, then this attack does 80 more, which is this okay? I think this is okay actually. Like, yeah, because you're doing 160, so 320. Yeah, you 2 KO most things. It's pretty decent. We've seen a lot of these kind of basics that if you reach a certain effect, you do a whole lot more damage, but they're never really killing anything unless you're hitting for weakness, which is kind of annoying, but still definitely not the worst option. Maybe if like fire type Charizard builds become more popular, then Lost Zone could have looked to this Palkia to include, but yeah, it doesn't seem like the worst card ever. Then we actually see a Glissapod line, which is nice to see. Has the attack Power Cross, which does 20 damage for each card in your opponent's hand. In all honesty, not like the worst attacker we've seen in terms of single prize attackers. Could be pretty efficient in all honesty. But you would want to pair it up with stuff like, if we ever seen ability that could increase the amount of cards in your opponent's hand, like give them more resources, sounds pretty bad. But, it's just food for thought. Could be a fun deck, I guess. Maybe not just like an attacker and Zork box, but just its own kind of fun rogue deck. Then we see Dondozo, which has the attack replenishing Gulp. Look at the top 5 cards of your deck, choose any number of basic energy cards you find there, and attach them to this Pokemon. Then you have to shuffle the other cards into your deck, and then Hydro Splash for 5 energy, not even 4, 5 energy, it does 180 damage. Definitely a meme card. You could probably make a really funny deck with this, with like just 20 energy and bravery charms and all that kind of shabam. Could be a lot of fun, to be honest, but unfortunately this card just doesn't seem that good. It's definitely like the best Dondozo for GLC, I think, which is hilarious, but unfortunately I just don't think this card is super great, which is a shame because I would have thought they'd want to make Dondozo an EX Pokemon for Raging Surf. Like, I would have thought that would make the most sense, but yeah, hopefully we do get a Dondozo EX that interacts with Tatsuguris, but unfortunately this card is kind of bad, but it's a shame. Could be very funny, but when you're getting killed by most things in the game, just 180 damage just isn't great, so yeah, nothing too crazy there. Then we see a Lantern that has the attack Aqua Spark. For Lightning Colorless, it does 80 damage, but if it has any water energy, it does 120 more, so it does 200. So if you have a reverse energy card attached to this, then you can do 200, which is really nice. So I guess like Zork Box has its new lightning option, I guess, but there's already like a Jolteon in 151 that already kind of does that. So yeah, I don't know. This card's okay. Could definitely be a neat option for Zork Box. Then we see a plus and a minim, which, to be honest, unfortunately aren't really doing anything. You kind of want to play them for the minim mainly, which says when your opponent attaches energy from the hand to one of their Pokemon, put 2 damage counters on that Pokemon. And to be honest, when these effects have been good in the TCG before, they're usually on like stadiums, as opposed to, an ability that requires you to have 2 Pokemon in play. Now, I did kind of think that the Solar Rock and Lunatone would be pretty bad, the ones that said like your stadiums don't affect you if you have both of them in play. But they ended up being pretty good, so maybe these guys could have a chance to shine at some point if, Chen Pao decks really take off, or we see another kind of deluge deck on the horizon, maybe. could be pretty good, but in all honesty, I don't think these cards are doing that much right now. Then we see our Galvantula, which basically has, I think this is like the same attacker Galvantula had in like the XY era or something. It's really funny, but yeah, nothing too crazy, sadly. Then we have a Zekrom, which can discard all tools of cards attached to your opponent's active Pokemon. Pretty nice, but in all honesty, if you're having to do that for selling the cards, then you might as well be playing stuff like, what was it called? Lost Vacuum and Tool Scrappers, so Shorting Crash ain't worth it. Raging Thunder does do 130, but we've seen a Zekrom in the past that did 130 and then 60 to itself or something, and then Polaris, so that was like a lot better than 40 to one of your bench Pokemon. But yeah, so this Zekrom, unfortunately, pretty underwhelming. Then we see Tapu Koko EX, which honestly isn't terrible and might be a really nice option for Lost Box, as well as like Miraidon decks. So what this thing does is it has the attack Revenge Shock, which does 30 damage, and if any of your Pokemon were KO'd last turn, this attack does 90 more, and it also does Polarises. So it's basically 120 plus Polarises for 2 energy, which isn't terrible, to be honest. Like, you could follow this up from like a Cramorant or something. The thing is, Lost Zone typically can get a KO after using Cramorant with stuff like Zamazenta or Snorlax, so that's like my biggest concern with this card. But in all honesty, it's definitely not terrible. You could also like power it up really quickly in Miraidon with like an Electric Generator or Flaffies, so yeah, the second attack is also not terrible, so I could definitely see this card seeing some amount of play. Then we see some Gimme Ghouls, which is nice because one of them has Core for Family, even though the other one has more HP. Then we see a Gligar with the Toxic attack, which is really cool to see. Haven't seen one of these in a while. Basically just poison, but 2 damage counters instead of 1. Just something fun worth mentioning. Then we have Glysaur, which has the attack Throbbing Needle, does 80 damage. And flip a coin if heads, your opponent's active Pokemon is now poisoned, but they take 2 damage counters instead of 1 between turns. I really don't know why this had to be on a coin flip, especially when you're only doing 80 damage, and especially when it's for 3 energy. So yeah, pretty bad card sadly, but it's fun to see new Glysaur, so I'm happy. Then we see a Donphan line, but unfortunately this Donphan I think is pretty bad, yeah. So Gargalanche does actually mill 2 cards from the top of your opponent's deck and do 30 damage, which is okay, but the second attack isn't really anything to write home about. Just does 160 and you can't attack next turn. It's whatever, I guess. Could be decent in Zoroark box, but aside from that, it's nothing too crazy. Then we see this Groudon, which I honestly think is actually a really decent option in the Garchomp deck. Has to attack Magma Purge, which does 60 damage for each fighting energy that you discard from your Pokemon any way you like, but you can only discard up to 4. So there is a cap, so you can only do up to 240 damage, but after doing Hydrolander in theory to do 160 to then accelerate 3 energy to your Groudon, then you have this single prize option on the bench that can basically just toss out 240, so your opponent has to choose between either swinging to Garchomp or knocking it out even, and then swinging to Groudon instead. So I do like that option a lot, to be honest. I think this could be a pretty cool card. Unfortunately, it's a terrible basic to start with, unless you use Overflowing Power, but yeah, I could definitely see this card being pretty decent, maybe even Lost Zone box, maybe. Don't know, could be. Then we see the Gabite and Gibble from earlier, because being a Terra type, they weren't synced up. Then we see Hoopa EX, which isn't the worst card ever, but it's not great either. Energy Crush does 50 for each energy attached to all your opponent's Pokemon in play. These kind of attacks just don't really see a lot of play if that's your best selling point, because basically your opponent will just see this coming a mile off and play around it, which is unfortunate, but it could be good in like a Raihan Springbox kind of Luminous deck where you just play all these different, like multi-price Pokemon, I guess. Could be cool. And then the attack Scoundrel Fist does 200 damage for 3 Dark Energy, which just really expensive for how little damage it's doing. It's not even doing 220, which would have been pretty decent to KO Miraidon and Chien-Pao. So yeah, definitely going to be a bit of a pass for me on this Hoopa, which is sad, but Energy Crush could be good again, I guess, in Raihan decks, but yeah, nothing too wild. Then we see this Minior, which is unfortunately a bit underwhelming for standard. It could be kind of cool for like GLC or something, like the Trunk League, guys, the Trunk League. But yeah, Minior, it's a fun card. I do like the idea of this in some smaller formats, especially in like pre-release and Cube, but sadly for standard, this card is pretty underwhelming. Then we see a Cloth, which might actually be the best budget deck from the set, which is hilarious, but Cloth has the attack Hysterical Scissors for 2 colors, does 30 damage, and if this Pokemon is affected by a special condition, this attack does 160 more damage, so you do 190 damage, which is honestly pretty strong, like especially when you consider we have Brute Bonnet, which says if it has an ancient booster capsule attached to it, you can leave both active Pokemon poisoned. So, assuming you use double turbo as well, you'll be going back down to 170, but then the poison will take it back up to 180. So, you are just like 2-occurring everything in the game, even with a double turbo attached. And both of these Pokemon are basics. Granted, you do need the tool cards, but we have Arvin. Does need a double turbo, but we can play 4, and then we can also play Energy Lotto. So, in all honesty, I don't think this card is terrible. Could be a pretty neat rogue deck, in all honesty. 120 HP also just isn't terrible, so you could like survive a hit from Cramorant, which is always nice. But yeah, it's not terrible in all honesty. Like if you want to use basic energy, you could, because we gain like energy sticker in 151 to help accelerate energy. But yeah, definitely think Cloth could be a fun budget deck to try out. Then we have Flamigo, which for fighting colorless does 20 damage and then 20 more for each of your opponent's bench Pokemon. We've seen these kind of attacks recently, actually. There was, I think, a Keldeo or something in Brilliant Stars that had this attack, so I looked at it the other day. But yeah, it's not great, to be honest. Like, your damage cap isn't that high. Again, unfortunately, I have to bring it up. Maybe in Lost Zone. Like, you could play this, I guess, in a single prize toolbox. Like, maybe there is a single prize deck to be had out of these cards. Like, you just play Raihan, bunch of basic fighting energy. Maybe you even get, like, the Hoopa EX involved or something. Like, you can make some like weird, funky rogue decks with these cards, is what I'm basically saying. And I do think we have a Flamigo already that does 60 snipe and then, 60 damage and 60 to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon if you have another Flamigo in play. So in theory, you could like play all these different Flamigos, and there's also like the one with the Attack United Wings as well, which can find other Flamigos. So it could be fun. Get a Flamigo deck going. Then we see a Gengar line for dark types, and unfortunately I don't think this card is super strong. It has the ability Nightgate that says once in your turn you can switch your active with one of your benched, which isn't the worst, I guess. Like Decidueye EX already getting replaced, but yeah, it's not like the worst option in the world. Could definitely be pretty fun, like EAB guys, come on. But yeah, GLC maybe, okay, I guess. There's better Gengars, I think, dark type wise, but yeah, could be a fun card nonetheless. Then we see Absol, which doesn't have the worst attacks in the world. Draw Sense could be okay, but it's kind of like just Serena, so I guess maybe not actually. Like this card isn't terribly great, but could definitely see it working in GLC or pre-release. And Scraggy is whatever, and then Scrafty is also whatever, though it does wall out basic Pokemon, but they could just switch out, so it's not like great or anything. Yveltal just 90 damage, your opponent's active as an evolution, but most evolution Pokemon that are relevant have more than 208 HP, which is crazy. So yeah, it's unfortunately not a good card. There's a Thievul, which is pretty cool. It's like a recreation of Team Skullgrunt, I believe, from Sun and Moon base set, which is kind of cool. So when you evolve it, you can look at your opponent's hand and then choose 2 energy cards you find there and have your opponent shove them back into their deck. Could be a super annoying effect, to be honest, if you combo this with stuff like Judge or Iono, but there's just so many ways of drawing cards in Standard right now. I don't trust this to be good. It could be pretty decent, though, in some kind of weird control deck. Let me know what you think about this Thievul down below, but I'm not sold. Then we have one of the most talked about cards from the set already, which is going to be Jirachi. Has the ability Stellar Veil, which says attacks of your opponent's basic Pokemon can put damage counters on your benched Pokemon. So unfortunately, it's decent, but as a lot of people have pointed out, it's definitely counterable quite easily by Lost Zone. Like, in theory, this should shut down Sableye, but of course, Sableye can still hit your active. They could also just, like, boss KO this with a Cramorant, and they also play Cross Switchers and Escape Ropes, which makes it very awkward. And if you're playing this, you're probably not making room for a Manaphy, so you're probably not protected against Radiant Greninja, which is a shame. They could also play Canceling Cologne if they really, really wanted to. There's just like so many ways to get around this, which is a shame. Like, I do want this to be the counter to Sableye, because I do think Sableye is a bit oppressive right now and will, inhibit a lot of evolving decks from doing well. But yeah, it's a bit of a shame. Sorry. That's better. Sorry, I'm battling a cold here. But yeah, Jirachi, it's a bit of a shame, but in all honesty, I don't think this card will be the end of Lost Zone, which is, it's a shame. But then we see Ferrothorn, which this Pokemon takes 30 less damage from attacks, which is hilariously bad. But what do we have here? We've got an Aegis Slash, which in all honesty might be pretty good actually. Has the ability Sacred Shield to prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks of your opponent's EX and V. And then Hard Bash does 120 for Metal Colors, and it isn't affected by any effects on your opponent's active Pokemon. And it also has 150 HP, so sorry. So it's like pretty reminiscent of the Decidueye that we got in Darkness Ablaze, which was it Decidueye? Yeah, it was Decidueye. What am I saying? I lost my train of thought there. Yeah, it's Decidueye. But so Decidueye did see a decent amount of play with the Obstagoon that came around in the Sword and Shield era, so it'll be interesting to see if this can kind of replicate the same success. Now, the funny thing is, Obstagoon was placing damage counters with its ability, and it was also warning out basic Pokemon, and then Decidueye had a snipe attack. So, in all honesty, I'm not sure if this card is really as good as Decidueye was. Now, I'm not saying we don't have options that could replace Obstagoon standard, like we do have the Nidoqueen from 151, which can also wall out basics, funnily enough, but I don't think this is going to be a competitive archetype. It could be a pretty fun rogue archetype. It'll definitely make for a fun budget deck, but I don't think this will be quite on the same power levels as Decidueye, but we'll have to see, I guess. But yeah, I'm not sold on Aegis Slash, but it could be a pretty fun deck nonetheless. Then we have Zacian, which does 30 damage, Ingasari Metal Energy, blah blah blah. It's just not great, unfortunately. We do have this Orthworm, which has a pretty funny attack. For metal double colors, does 90 damage. And if you have 3 or less cards remaining in your deck, you can do 150 more. So you can do 240 damage for 3 energy, which is wild. But you have to have 3 or less cards remaining in your deck. So it's just kind of bad because you have to thin out so much. Like, there is ways of never decking out with like Pidgeot V and Pyukumuku, which is cool. But in all honesty, I don't think this card is very good, and I'll tell you why. Zamazenta for 2 metal and colors does 220 if something died last turn, which is a much easier requirement to hit than having 3 cards or less. And yeah, 240 is a lot more damage, and I get it. Like, this card will be very fun to try out. I'm sure there'll be numerous like LDF videos trying to make this thing work, and it'll be a fun time to watch. But in all honesty, I don't think this card is going to be super great. It'll be fun, it's one of those fun but bad memes, I guess. But yeah, it's pretty funny. But 240, like, wow, like 240 damage, it's just crazy as well. But sadly, it's just, yeah, it's a pretty bad card, unfortunately. Then we have Goldengo EX, which isn't a bad card, fortunately. 260 HP, metal type, has the ability bonus coins. It says once in your turn you may draw a card, which is nice. But if his Pokemon is in the active spot, you can draw 2 instead. So basically, if you're playing like a quad Goldengo deck, which is probably what this deck wants to be anyway, you can hopefully switch between at least 2 a turn, and then, draw at least 4 cards through your ability alone, which is pretty strong. Then it also has the attack Make It Rain. It says discard any number of basic energy cards from your hand, and this attack does 50 damage for each card discarded in this way. So it is kind of like a spiritual reprint of the Alolan Dugtrio from the early days of Sun and Moon, which wasn't a very good deck, but there is a lot of reasons why Goldengo could be a lot stronger and could be a genuinely competitive deck. There is, of course, energy retrieval and superior energy retrieval, but we do also have a new item card that was recently revealed. That was revealed after this was revealed, so I didn't mention it when I first went over Goldengo. But there was an item card revealed from Paradox Rift called Earthen Vessel, which says discard a card from your hand, and then you can search your deck for up to 2 basic energy cards, which is definitely going to be a 4 in this deck. So I definitely think this card has a lot more potential, having seen that item card, to be honest. But I don't think this card will be broken. I think some people maybe think this is broken. I personally am not sold on this just yet, just because you still need so many energies to get a KO. You need like 6 or 7 really to KO most Pokemon, but it is doable, especially with that item and this ability. But yeah, it remains to be seen just how good Goldengo EX is. I still haven't done any testing for this card, probably should, but yeah, we'll have to wait and see for Goldengo, but I can see why people think this will be a good card. Then we have Bombardier, which is pretty bad. Like, even when we lose Battle of VIP Pass, guys, I'd rather just play like Nest Balls and Great Balls. I'm not going to play a 2 prize 200 HP Pokemon that's weak to lightning just to try and, get some Pokemon onto the bench. It's a shame that we're in that state, but I just think the game is way too fast for this forever to be viable. But it is a shame, but I don't think Bombardier X is very good. And then we see Stylizar, which says if you played a supporter card from your hand during this turn, this target does 70 more damage, which is, in all honesty, pretty decent in GLC for 3 colors, doing 140. Not terrible, actually. So, nice thing to bear in mind. Then we reach the trainers, and we're getting a rare candy reprint, a switch reprint, and a gorgeous mantle 2 card that says if this Pokemon is attached to a Pokemon that doesn't have a Roblox, it gets 100 HP, 100 plus HP, and when it's knocked out, your opponent takes one more prize card. So basically, any single prize Pokemon that you can think about in standard, like Wailord, for example, which already has like 220 HP or something daft, like you just give it another 100, it's already at 300 HP. Like, it is a 2 prizer, but it's just really funny to think about, but you could do that. There's also stuff like the Earthworm, which you can give like 200 and I think it's 230 HP with its ability. So in theory, you could give that 330 HP as a single prize basic. Well, 2 prize basic, but still very, very strong. So in all honesty, I think this card would be a lot of fun to mess around with. Is it going to be competitive? I'm not sure, to be honest. Like, giving up an extra prize card is obviously pretty grim, but depends if we have like any good single prizers that could take advantage of this. Just thought of another one, Wishy Washy from Evolving Skies. So yeah, definitely think this card could be pretty fun, but we'll have to wait and see. Then we see Technical Machine Turbo Energize, which allows you to search your deck for up to 2 basic engine cards and attach them to your bench Pokemon any way you like, which is pretty decent. Like, the fact that you have to discard the TMs after using them is a bit lame, I guess, but you probably don't want to use more than one Turbo Energize in a game anyway, so it's not like the worst thing ever. So yeah, I definitely think this card is pretty solid. Definitely not the worst attack in the world. Could definitely see play, to be honest, in especially quad decks that want a way to accelerate more energy. So could be pretty good. Then we see Technical Machine Blindside, which does 100 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon with any damage counters already on it for 3 colors, which isn't terrible, to be honest. The fact that you can just give this to basically any deck as well is pretty scary. So, even Miraidon now has a decent snipe option as well, aside from Regieleki. So, just something worth bearing in mind. You could definitely put this in like a Chien-Pao deck as well, for example. So, I think this card could be pretty cool. Then we see Larry, which, in all honesty, isn't terrible actually. Flip a coin if I had to search your deck for any 2 Pokemon. But if you flip Tails, then you search your deck for a basic Pokemon. Not the worst, to be honest, especially if you have to go second or something. But yeah, just get outclassed, I think, right now by stuff like Battle VIP Pass and Ultra Ball, but could definitely be decent somewhere down the line, and of course, pretty solid in GLC. Then we see one of the worst supporters I think I've seen in a while. Flip a coin. If heads on Chantal says switch one of your opponent's bench Pokemon with their active, so it's a Gust. But if you flip tails, you switch your active with one of your benched. So it's either a boss's orders or a switch, but it just depends on how lucky you are feeling. And my question to you is, why would you not just play boss's orders? Because if I'm going to risk a switch, I'd rather just play an item. And if I want my Gust, I'd rather just play boss. And no, this is never worth it to play as a 5th version of boss. I would sooner play Pokemon Catcher over Chantal. It's a pretty bad card in honesty. I'm very comfortable with saying this is one of the worst supporters I've ever seen. But yeah, then we see Rika and Parasol Lady. Rika is okay. It's one of these, look at the top 4 cards. You take 2 of them, shuffle the rest in, or put them on the bottom of your deck and stuff like that. It's nothing too crazy, to be honest. Doesn't usually see that much play. Then we have Parasol Lady, which says shove your hand in, draw 4, which is okay. But if you go second, you draw until you have 8 instead. So assuming you're playing like Luminion, I guess, you could guarantee shuffle draw 8 going second, which isn't the worst, to be honest. I've seen worse effects, but nothing too wild either. And then Magical Energy, just when you attach you heal 30 damage, so basically a Blissey V buff, and maybe Arceus buff actually, but sadly not much else. And then some of the secret rares were also revealed. Probably my favorite is the Groudon. Goldengo was actually pretty nice, but Yeah, but unfortunate. Apologies, guys, for losing my voice towards the end there. I definitely have a bit of a cold going on. There is some highlights, though, like the Orthworm is pretty funny. Goldengo actually looks to be pretty competitive. Aegislash could be pretty decent with the Nidoqueen from 151, which is nice to see. Jirachi might be a good Sableye counter, but it remains to be seen. Some single price Pokemon that probably won't do much, sadly. Flamigo is kind of funny. Cloth could be a pretty good rogue deck, actually. There's some fun stuff in here. There's some good tech cards, like Garchomp EX is definitely like the strongest card, I would say. Tapu Koko is a pretty decent tech card, but yeah, I guess this is kind of it. Oh yeah, Dondozo, what a meme card. But yeah, this is it for Ember Power. Thank you for watching. Let me know what you think down below. And yeah, thank you for watching.